Welcome back to the Bill and Ray Show. I'm Bill. I'm out in the brew house again today. It's bottling day. I've got a batch of beer that's been fermenting for several weeks and it's definitely ready to bottle up now. So yesterday I got busy. I already washed out all these bottles and ready to go. They need to be run some sanitizer through them. We'll get that going. But these racks here, these drying racks, are really the way to go. The basic racks hold 24 each, so there's 48, and then I put in some other bottles up here on top so that I make sure I've got plenty of bottles. I should use probably 52, 54 bottles or so for a 5-gallon batch. But yesterday when I was washing these up, I just use a bucket and put some warm soapy water in there. Get a good bottle brush. This was the bottle brush that came with the original kit that I got, and that thing just was not very good. It looks pretty terrible. I should just throw it away, but I don't know, I hang on to it just in case I might need it out of some reason. So this one I've got just from the local supplier, and I've used this for quite a few batches, and it looks as good as when I bought it. So I soak the bottles in there and flush them out, brush them up a little bit. So this little adapter goes onto your sink. These are really neat. It has an automatic valve that opens up when you press down on it. And I usually get a dozen, this is kind of a small sink, but I get a dozen bottles in the tub, in the bucket first, wash them and put them all in the sink. And then the outside of the bottle is going to be all sudsy too. So you kind of got to get into a rhythm. You got to make sure you get your hands kind of rinsed off, and you're going to use this water to rinse off the outside of the bottle, and then rinse the inside of the bottle while you get your next one ready to go. And then you'll put this over in the drying rack, so you kind of get a little round robin going with rinsing these out and getting them set up to dry. So these guys are dry. And I'll mix up a little sanitizer in a gallon of water in my tub here. I'll have to empty all this rack out onto the counter, turn them all up, and then I'll be dipping them in the sanitizer, put a little bit in there, doesn't take much, but slosh it around, and be putting the rack up here as the sanitized bottles. But the first thing I really need to get going is the sugar water, because these are going to be carbonating in the bottle, called bottle conditioning. So instead of kegging it and using CO2 to pressurize it to get your carbonation, this will actually ferment some more in the bottle to generate the carbonation. So for that to happen, you have to add new sugar to your beer and mix it in and bottle it up, and then after, it should be a week, but it always seems like it's not really good until about 2 weeks have gone by before the beer is really well carbonated. So I've got caps all ready to go, and I'll put sanitizer in here. The caps will soak in sanitizer. And I'll measure out 8 ounces of sugar, 16 ounces of water, and boil that because we want to sanitize the sugar water that we're going to add to the beer. We don't want to add any weird yeast or bacteria or anything to the mix. So that actually needs to boil for 10-15 minutes to make sure you've got a clean addition. So you're going to put that in the bottom of the bottling bucket and start siphoning the beer from the glass carboy into the bottling bucket. So this is corn sugar, or it's granulated dextrose, so I can weigh some of that out. So the other thing I'll be using that you need is a bottling bucket. Bottling buckets, they have a hole in them for your spout to come out. So this will all get sanitizer put in here as well. before we get going. So this has a little washer and your spigot. So that's going to go on down here, and then we'll hook up our little hose with a valve, a bottling tool that helps you fill the bottles. And that is this little guy here. It's got a little bitty valve in the bottom. And the hose will connect from here to the valve, and then we get going, and we'll be using this to go into each bottle and transfer beer from the bucket to the bottles. So first we got to get some sugar weighed out and get boiling. So with your bottling bucket, this valve, as obviously some position is open and closed, you want to make sure when you put your beer in here that valve is closed. So when you get your sanitizer in there, that's one good time to check out, make sure that's open and that's closed. You don't want to mess with that until you got your beer in there and you're ready to go. So that's going to get sloshed around in there. I've got all the bottles to sanitize. This bucket is pretty clean. You just want to make sure you get some of those nice bubbles. Scrubbing bubbles, that's what does the action. About that foam. That foam is actually a good thing. But you need to start being cautious about what you get things in contact with. So when we have the sugar water in the bottom there, you start transferring your beer. At some point you get all your beer in there, and you're going to want to really stir it up well. You don't want that sugary solution to separate out, just sit there on the bottom. So we're going to have our stir spoon, which is clean, but we're going to make sure we have sanitizer on that. We've got all our bottling caps. We're going to put some of the sanitizer in there. And it just gets to be a big sudsy mess all over. This is the hose that's going to be transferring to the bottles. And we've got a little fill adapter. The first little bit that will go through, we're just going to let it run out a little bit to kind of flush out the excess sanitizer. And then to transfer from the carboy to the bottling bucket, we'll use the auto siphon. So we want to make sure that's got sanitizer run through there. On the outside of it. That's why it's nice to have a space like this to work in, because you can just kind of make a mess. It'll all clean up. It's all good sudsy fun. Now when you're going to bring that carboy set up here, you got to make sure your hands aren't slippery. And you're going to have to lift this thing up here carefully. And you don't want to shake it up at this point. Because there's going to be a layer of yeast down here that we don't want to disturb. Actually, in order for the carbonation to work in the bottles, you have to have some yeast in your beer. So there'll be some in there inevitably, but you don't need to get afraid of if you get a little bit out of the bottom. You're going to have a little bit of yeast at the bottom of your bottles anyway, and yeah, nobody really likes a bunch of sludge in the bottom of their beer bottle, but that's homemade beer, and when it's conditioned in the bottle, you're going to have some of that. You're going to want that, so not something to be too afraid of. So our sugar water is done doing its thing. It's been boiling for a little while. And make sure we get everything all set. So go ahead and add that bottle bucket. Clean that up in a minute. Take our airlock out. And then you can see and you can start to smell what your beer is going to be like. And that is a good, oh, that's a good moment. We get that fresh beer transferring in there, that warm sugar water gets it to release a little bit of that aroma, and that is some nice golden clear beer. This will take a minute. So we got it transferred over. There's a little bit left in the bottom, plus the yeast sludge. So we got pretty much all of it. So this is another time, sometimes you forget to do it, but it's a good time to take another reading. Helps get this in really strong light, and it's got a little focus adjustment. So you're looking for this where it goes from the blue to the white. It's about 1.029 is my reading right now. I got to clean some things up here before I get going. Okay, all the bottles, I've run some sanitizer in them, and they're all in the drying rack. We've got our sanitized equipment here. Hook up to our bottling bucket valve. So we open the valve on there, and you can see where this valve runs, and when you pull it up, it stops. Of course, it doesn't stop perfectly. So you get up to the top of the neck, and as you bring this up, you want to leave a little bit of a space at the top of your bottles. Carbonation will work better. There's a little bit of headroom left there. So the volume of this dip tube is going to kind of approximate how much volume you need. So you have it all the way at the bottom, so it comes up to the top, you let it loose and that valve shuts off. Go to the next bottle. So this little setup works pretty well. It takes some time. But you have to think about this beer is like a food preparation. Beer is basically a live food. Start off with natural ingredients. You go through preparation, cooking, different steps that require different equipment, cleanup. These are all things you have to do preparing any kind of food, anything you're going to consume. And as I was told back where I used to work, good things take time. Or maybe that's what I told my boss when he was wondering how come it was taking so long to do something. But some people think, well, this bottling is just a lot of work, you should just keg it. And that's true, I mean, kegging is one way to go, but it has its set of issues too, and I don't really have room in the house for a kegerator, and it's another investment. And it's another appliance that's running, taking electricity, and you still have to clean that out with each batch, clear the lines and sanitize things and repair valves and whatnot and get CO2 bottles refilled. And so it's not completely easy. And the thing that's nice about having the bottled beer is you get to take it to your neighbors, to your friend's house, to a family gathering. You can just grab a six-pack and go down the road with it. You can't do that if you've got it all kegged up at home in your basement. So, you know, if you've got a space in your house and you entertain or you've got your buddies over all the time, that can work out really nice to have a kegerator in the house and do it that way. And eventually, I probably will do that. And maybe I'll get bigger equipment and I'll do 15-gallon batches instead of little 5-gallon batches. But this is kind of showing you how to work with simple gear. We're fortunate these days to have good equipment and good ingredients to make good beer with. Love to hear people's comments if they have any suggestions or questions about what I'm doing. And but if you're doing this yourself and you enjoy the results, don't let anybody tell you you're doing it wrong. Because I've been making some pretty good beer and my family seems to enjoy it, and when I go to the local brewery, or one here in town, they make some pretty good beer for sure. But I've been to some breweries and had their house specialty that's won all kinds of awards, and it's not always all that impressive. I mean, it's very doable to produce some very respectable beer at home with not an enormous amount of equipment. Okay, well, it's a good thing I washed up as many bottles as I did. I only had one left over that I didn't fill. So all these are full now, and now they need to be capped. So the capping, I have just a two-handle manual capping tool. Well, they're all manual for home brewers. This is cheap ones that you can buy, usually like $20 or so. So you put the cap in there, it's got a little magnet, holds it on. Slop it on there. And it always seems a little scary crimping a metal piece onto glass. But these bottles are fairly tough. The bottle caps are in sanitizer, which kind of is a slippery, well, it's not real, it seems like it's soapy, but anyway, it helps I think, get them on there. Kind of lubricates everything. So you want to put it down firmly. I think I've only had one bottle maybe that I would say the seal failed. It's a pretty reliable method of sealing. And I haven't experienced a broken bottle at this stage. Would definitely be a bit of a showstopper to have to deal with cleaning up a broken bottle and spilled beer all over. But you buy these caps in all kinds of different colors. They make very expensive ones that are supposed to get the oxygen out, because there's a little bit of oxygen inside there, which oxidation is always bad for flavors. But I don't know, I think that's maybe a little bit esoteric. I'm not sure how many people can truly drink a beer and tell the difference of whether it was sealed with an oxygen scavenging cap or not. But some people got the money, sounds like a good idea to you. That's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. That's another thing about doing this. You're doing your own beer, you get to make the decisions. Now these are all just set out here on the counter. One thing I have found is a little bit of inevitable spilled beer is sticky business, and I may or may not go through and wipe down the bottoms of all these bottles, but sometimes you'll get a little dried beer on there in a couple days, and gets to be a little bit messy. Anyway, that's what it's all about, a little bit of work. But the next step is time to drink. Now if you have my ducks in the line, now is the time to get started on making another boil. Start another batch about the time you're doing the bottling. Of course, doing this is taking up a fair bit of time, so not real anxious to jump right in and start another batch. But if you want beer to be ready by the time you've consumed this, you're going to want to get another batch started right away, or start making bigger batches. So I hope you guys found something useful in this, and I'll continue the adventure in another 10 days, 2 weeks, when I can try one out, see how it turned out. I know it's going to be good. It smells just great, and it's nice and clear. Everything worked well. The ferment went well, so all my temperatures have been fine. So this will make some really good beer. Alright, you guys have a good day. Just wanted to show this is a batch of mead I made up almost a month ago. And it is still actively fermenting and bubbling away. I've had to change and clean out that airlock countless times. It's a little bit of a foamy top that keeps coming up into the airlock, but usually you get a little bit of a startup period, and then you get some really active fermenting that goes on for a few days, and it may carry on pretty strongly for a week or something. I don't know, this seems like it's never ending. It's slowed down some, but I can't believe after this much time this is definitely going to ferment out to a dry mead, it would seem like, because it's just been fermenting steadily for, like I say, it's coming up nearly a month. And so I'm going to be curious to see how far this goes. Either that or it's bubbling away making something nasty. I don't know.